Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today talking about this. Now, this is an example of the British middle parka. We have looked at one of these previously on the channel of the third pattern, the third version of these that was manufactured. This is the second version. I don't have an example of the first version of these, unfortunately. All three were introduced for service during the Korean War. They were introduced in rapid succession and would go on to be used through into the 1970s. And I say this is an example of the middle of the three designs. It differs from the later design, which we've already looked at, primarily in not having a removable hood. The hood is fixed on this one. The third pattern, the hood is attached with buttons and can be removed. And this is also made of gabardine as opposed to sateen. It was found that sateen was a harder wearing material. So for the third pattern, the third version of these, the switch was made from gabardine, which we have here, to sateen cloth. The colour and everything remained basically the same. You just have that change in the material. This is not in the best condition. It's missing some buttons, missing the wire from the hood, and the zip doesn't work, unfortunately. It's actually missing the zip, the runner part of the zip, unfortunately. But nevertheless, I thought it was worth looking at this, running through some of the details as we do, turning it inside out and so forth, and have a look at it in some detail. So it's a project, do some restoration work on this at some point in the future, simply by replacing the buttons and fixing the hood. Whether I'll replace the zip or not, I'm not entirely sure on that. Prefer to keep the original zip in. It is damaged, so I won't be able to get it working again, but I may well leave it with the original zip in. But we'll look at it in its unrestored form here as it came to me first of all. So this second version of the design includes 4 pockets on the front here. You have 2 breast pockets and you have 2 lower pockets there. The initial version of this didn't have the upper pockets. That's one major visual difference. In addition to the 4 pockets, we actually have a small outer pocket here. And I believe these are for quartz fibre dosimeters. Now, obviously, the threat of nuclear war at the time was seen as being very real. And a lot of the early combat clothing includes these little pockets here, and they are perfectly sized to take a quartz fibre dosimeter, which obviously would be a necessity if operating in an irradiated zone to ensure troops, well, to at least measure the radiation dose that troops were receiving whilst operating in that zone. Down the front, we have a button closure down the front here. You can see we actually only have the top 2 buttons here, one here and one here. You would have a further 3 down the front there. And this covers a heavy duty brass zip. And there's that damage I referred to. You've lost quite a few teeth there. And obviously that's where the runner has come off this zip at some point in the past. So may end up replacing that. We'll see. But the zip is broken on this, unfortunately. If you want to close this up further, we pull the hood up here. In common with the third pattern, which we've already looked at, there is a loop here and a hook up on the hood there, and you can see that loop there hooks over there, and with the hood up that closes up right around the face like that. And you can see all the stitching here, the sort of quilt stitching to reinforce this. Ordinarily there would be a wire running around the cowl of the hood there so that you could mold that and shape it, but that's been removed. You can see the hole where that wire has been removed. It won't be a problem to get some copper wire and thread that back through and tidy that up there and restore the wire. That's one of the easier jobs to do with this, something I've done previously with various parkas and things I've received with broken wires in the hood. So that is an easy enough job. We'll see this more clearly when we turn it inside out, but as you can see, the hood is lined with a faux pile there. There is a draw cord at the waist. We'll see more detail of that when we turn this inside out. That's basically what we can see at the front here, so we'll start moving this around and have a look at some of the other details. Looking at the right hand side of the mannequin here, we'll start at the top by raising the hood up and having a look at the side profile of this. So you can see the hook there where the flap comes around and hooks up to close this in around the chin. You can see you have a draw cord here around the front, which allows the hood to be drawn in as well, and there's one across the rear here as well, which comes out here and on the other side to draw in the neck as well. So this can be pulled in tight around the head to stop the wind getting in and to press that faux pile against the skin and trap warm air to keep the head warm, an important part of the design. We have the hood raised up out of the way. We can see we do have an epaulette up on the shoulder here using the same large buttons as we saw before. The idea of using the large buttons for the pockets, the front closure and the epaulettes is that these can be manipulated more easily wearing gloves when compared to smaller buttons. That's the reason that large buttons are used throughout. Moving down the arm here, you can see we do have a seam coming adrift slightly here, but we have the elbow reinforcement there, a double layer of cloth over the elbow. And down at the cuff here, we'll see when we turn this inside out, there is a knitted cuff within, again to trap air within the body of the parka. We have a strap here at the wrist to adjust the wrist in, and this is actually, I believe, taken from a later version of the Parka. Someone's fitted this. These should be, I believe, fixed in position, and this one is loose, and it's also made of the sateen, the later sateen material, and a bit of rust and so forth on the buckle there. So these wrist straps are designed to pull the wrist in, as well as having that knitted cuff to trap air within the Parka. So the important thing with the cold weather clothing is to trap warm air against the body, provide that layer of insulation, and you have that strap there at the wrist. And as I say, I believe this has been retrofitted to this from a later version of the Parka, the third pattern, because the strap is made of sateen rather than gabardine. So we have that there, the sleeve, details of the sleeve and so forth there. We can see the draw cord running around at the waist here, and just details of construction, the seams and so forth running down under the arm there. Otherwise, not a lot more to see. We'll move this round now and have a look at the back. Moving this round to look at the back, we'll lift the hood up out of the way. You can see the construction of the back of the hood there, the channel for that draw cord which pinches in the back of the hood. And as you can see, this is fixed, this is sewn in position, in contrast to the one we saw on the third pattern, which has a row of buttons under a flap here, meaning the hood is removable. It's fixed on this and the first pattern. It's only the third pattern that has the removable hood. You see the draw cords there for this running down from this draw cord which crosses at the back here and allows the hood to be drawn in. Otherwise, the back of this is very plain. We again have the draw cord running around at the waist there, as you can see, and of course the tail coming down here, which is mirrored by the liner under there as well. And we do have a couple more missing buttons under there, unfortunately, which need to be restored as well, where the liner should button into the tail there. Hopefully that shows up in shot. It may be a little bit low. It may be coming a bit low to actually fit in frame there, but we have the tail coming round on the Parka there. That's the back. We'll move this round to look at the left-hand side now. And looking at the left-hand side here, this simply illustrates the hood is basically a mirror image. You have the other side of the draw cord which runs through the back of the hood here, the other side of the draw cord which runs up around the front there, an epaulette, the same elbow reinforcement on the arm, which is unfortunately missing on this side at the rear. That's actually been removed. We do have it at the front there, and again we have that strap, and again this is made of sateen material rather than the gabardine, so I believe this has been retrofitted from a later later example of the Parkas, excuse me, and I believe to replace probably one that was missing, but that's how it came to me with this strap added, presumably from a later Parka. And again we have the knitted cuff inside there. That's the left hand side of this. Next thing to do is to turn this inside out and have a look at the internal details. So as you can see with this turned inside out, the lining material, the faux pile, is actually fixed. This is sewn in and forms part of the seams and construction of the Parka itself, although it is loose and buttons into the tail as we saw from the outside. You can see here the draw cord at the waist, which I mentioned when we were looking at the exterior details. The heavyweight brass zip there behind the button flap down the front, as you can see there. And we'll see more detail of the hood when we move this round, but you can see here you have that cowl, and then you have the faux pile lining inside the hood as well. So a very warm garment, obviously traps a lot of air. The intention of this is to trap a lot of air in the pile to give another layer of insulation, another warm layer of air around the body. That's the front of the interior. We'll move this round now and have a look at the right hand side. Looking at the right hand side of this, you can see the side profile of the hood up here, and just shows you the whole thing is pile lined apart from the cowl and this section at the neck here. You can see the construction of that, the seams running up there. Seams running down the shoulders here, as you can see, all stitched in through this lining material. At the cuff, we have that internal knitted cuff, and that is stitched to a section of gabardine which runs around inside. You can actually see on this side where the elbow reinforcement's been removed. Obviously this would be the left hand side, and externally the stitching's come away, but you can see underneath that the pile lining continues right the way down to the cuff here, and this elasticated section on this section of gabardine is just stitched in on top of that around the wrist here, again to trap warm air within the arm, stop it escaping at the cuffs. That's the idea of that. So you have that detail there down on the cuff. And then moving around to look at the rear, again you can see the pile lining throughout there. Lift the hood out of the way there, you can see the details of construction again, the seams and where the hood attaches around at the neck there. We have two buttons here. There should in theory be a tail in this, similar to airborne clothing. That's unfortunately been removed, but we have the two buttons for that stitched through the lining material there. And the lining itself is loose at the tail. You can see that there, you can see where the tail should attach, and there should be buttons here to button the liner in at the tail here, but they have both been removed unfortunately, so I'll need to replace those as well at some point. That's the back of this. And finally, looking at the left-hand side, other than the closure on the hood, which we talked about when we looked at the external details, this is essentially a mirror image of what we saw on the other side. There aren't any further details to talk about. You have the elasticated cuff there, the various details of the construction, nothing else to point out here really. So I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, the middle of the three versions of the middle Parka, so the second pattern. Would like to find a first pattern at some point. The earlier patterns of these, the two earlier patterns, are more difficult to find than the third. The third pattern remained in production for a while after the Korean War, and they were just made in larger numbers, it seems, much more readily available on the market. I will keep an eye out, as I say. It'd be nice to find perhaps a nicer example of the second pattern as well. Although this, once I've restored the buttons and put the wire back in the hood, will be a lot better in terms of having this on display and so forth, and a nice thing to have in the collection, as I say. So, I hope you found it interesting looking at this. If you have, and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as I always say, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It really is greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down below as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.